During the next month, about 400 households in the Wallsend area will be asked to participate in the project. Members of the Newcastle West Community Health Team are trying to find out what people believe are the major health problems in their neighbourhood. This includes environmental factors that some may feel contribute to health problems. The second part of the survey is a free health check.
We'll be measuring their cholesterol, and that seems to be the in thing at the moment. And with Heart Week, a little while back, we had a good response there. A lot of people wanted their cholesterol levels done and blood pressures and so on. And we can, after that, give them some direction.
The project is being funded by the Commonwealth Department of Health in conjunction with Newcastle University.
The Walkworth mine was one of the Upper Hunter's most profitable open-cut mines, but like most, it's feeling the bite of the downturn in world coal prices. At the beginning of July, it presented its workers with a 14-point plan to restructure, reduce operating costs and increase production. But negotiations broke down, and on Sunday night, the company decided to push ahead with one of the more controversial aspects of the plan, the introduction of an 8.5-hour day instead of the current 7. This would mean that each worker would be forced to work an hour and a half of overtime each day, enabling Walkworth to increase its production by 20%, which the company said would once again make it profitable. At the same time, it would eliminate the need to employ any extra workers. Management says after the breakdown of talks, there was no other alternative but to pursue with earlier plans. But the union has accused Walkworth of breaching the federal government's moratorium and says it plans a national strike on Wednesday unless the company backs off.
My understanding of the award is that reasonable overtime means that a person individually is entitled to consider a request to work overtime and give an independent decision. Now, the company has forced a blanket commitment on the workers at Walkworth saying that they must all work an 8.5-hour shift on a continuous basis week by week.
Good afternoon, I'm Helen Hughes. In tonight's news, plans for the council-owned Bar Beach Pavilion. The current lessee, Lloyd Moffat, says he's prepared to move out and shift his investment to Port Stephens.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Tenders for the pavilion at Bar Beach will be called this Saturday. Despite speculation to the contrary, the lessee for the past 10 years, Lloyd Moffat, says he has made an offer to Newcastle City Council.
But as far as I'm concerned, they're asking me, will I tender, won't I tender? Well, the cat and mouse game's over. I put my submission in 18 months ago and I should see no reason why I won't leave it in.
It seems this restaurant has become a millstone round Lloyd Moffat's neck. His interests now lie with 2 tenders he's submitted for a restaurant and tavern at the Queen's Wharf development. Tenders he's confident have made the shortlist. He's also preparing to cut his losses here and reinvest out of Newcastle at Port Stephens. Paul Hogan may have popularised the idea of throwing a prawn on the barbie, but Lloyd Moffat is ready to cash in on it. The Moffats already own the Oyster Barn at Swan Bay, a modest farm and eatery that tourists are flocking to by the coachload. Lloyd Moffat believes it has the potential to become the biggest tourist attraction in the Hunter region. All that's needed is money.
It's my couple of $100,000 that I would have to put in here. I feel that it's better going into the oyster farm. And of course, our waterways up there are perfect, and our tidal and the water conditions are perfect for the prawns. So instead of just having a prawn on the barbie, I'm going to grow them, and you can scoop them out and put your own on the barbie.
He says after his dealings with Newcastle City Council, he's ready to invest elsewhere.
You know, they want to encourage me a little bit to stay in Newcastle, otherwise I'll have my hands full up in Port Stephens.
Well, you yourself say people see you as the rock and roll king. This project will provide a very different image. Is it something you've always wanted to do?
Yes, of course, I don't mind working, but I might be getting too old for the late nights myself.
Hello, I'm Janelle Provost. The Newcastle City Council has opposed the DMR's preferred option for a link road through Wall's End. It says the new road, which will link Newcastle to the F3 freeway, should bypass Wall's End and be diverted to either Sandgate or Hexham.
For all the news,
Join us tonight
at 6.
Well, the tremendous advantage to Newcastle is that you will have permanently located here the Industrial Commission of New South Wales, who will deal with industrial disputes so that they can be settled within the region.
It must stand as a backhanded compliment to the Hunter, however, as Newcastle is the only centre in the state outside of Sydney which now has a local Department of Industrial Relations. The department is a major occupant of the new Harbour Park Centre, and so Mr Hills was special guest at the opening. The building is one of 3 which will eventually be built at slightly different levels along the foreshore. Designers say the all-glass exterior conserves energy and provides a conducive working environment inside. One thing they probably didn't count on was that due to its unique reflections of the cityscape, it could be destined to be surrounded by artists on any bright day. After the opening speeches, Mr Hill was joined by fellow Minister and State Attorney-General Terry Sheehan in the unveiling of a commemorative plaque. The Commission is equipped with a court and a hearing chamber and will be staffed by full-time review officers. The block also contains the State Compensation Board, which will now be able to assess compensation claims in Newcastle.
Thousands of Hunter Valley miners pinned their hopes on yesterday's meeting of the Coal Consultative Council, the body with representatives from the mining union, federal and state governments and employers. With the coal mining moratorium on sackings expiring tomorrow, it was a crucial chance to find a solution, but very little was achieved. The only issue for agreement was the enormous amounts of sackings. Employers said the number of retrenchments could be lessened if unions agreed to changes in work practices, but the glimmer of hope faded when the unions rejected the offer. It's expected in the next 18 months to 2 years, 8,000 jobs will be lost. In the next 3 to 6 months, 1,500 will go, starting from the end of next week. Miners Federation President John Maitland warned a national strike is now inevitable.
Immediately retrenchment notices are handed out, we'll be compelled to look at some form of national industrial action.
While visiting Newcastle yesterday, State Minister for Industrial Relations Pat Hill said that despite the collapse of top-level talks, more discussion should continue.
And all I say to the parties is that it is essential that they talk, and if any way I can, as the Minister for Industrial Relations in New South Wales, bring the parties together, well, I'd be delighted to do that, because we have to avoid a catastrophe in the coal mining industry.
The volumatic infusion pump is the first of a new generation of equipment outdating earlier models. Its main role is to help deliver anti-cancer drugs to patients by more effective and efficient means.
It enables us to control the amount of drug they get so that they get precisely what they need, not too little and not too much. Previously, before we had the funding to purchase this pump, we had other pumps that could not deliver drugs quite as fast and nor as well controlled. It's also automatic and it's also portable, so it can be used for both inpatients and outpatients, and it allows us to do really a lot more that we couldn't previously do.
The $3,000 pump was presented to the Mater Hospital's oncology unit at a meeting of the Hamilton Rotary Club last night. Director Professor Forbes also outlined a new project now awaiting government approval and funding, which will place the Hunter region in the forefront of diagnosing and treating breast cancer in its early stages.
This is a proposal that we've put to the government to fund a breast cancer screening project for the Hunter region. It's a very important project because if we can deliver quality screening with a regular breast x-ray or a mammogram, we can cut the mortality from breast cancer by about 1/3 in the screened population. In the Hunter region there are probably between 60 to 100 deaths from breast cancer a year. We could cut that by 20 or 30 deaths from breast cancer each year, as well as eliminating the morbidity that comes from advanced breast cancer.
Yesterday, Premier Unsworth joined parliamentary colleagues, including State Treasurer Ken Booth, to officially begin work on the controversial multi-purpose centre. A few protesters from local progress groups displayed their concerns, but were clearly outnumbered by supporters. Despite the matter of tenders still to be called to commence construction of the multi-million-dollar project, Mayor Jeff Pasterfield assured onlookers work would begin by October. The Premier brushed aside the hundreds of protest letters his department had received against the building of the centre at Spears Point, saying those people would probably be the first in the lineup to use the facilities. Then it was down to the business of turning the sod, with a shiny shovel presented from the Lake Macquarie City Council. But the Premier donated it back to be displayed in the centre when completed. Later that night, the Premier was guest of honour at the launch of the Labor Party's campaign for the upcoming Lake Macquarie City Council elections. Heading the campaign, Mayor Pasterfield outlined the policies that 8 of the Labor aldermen will put forward to seek re-election.
The Lake Macquarie Council under Labor leadership has been recognised as being one of the best run and most efficiently managed councils in New South Wales. And I say that because that came directly from the department after they had looked into our affairs. The planning scheme gazetted is one of the most detailed of council areas and will serve as a guide for the city's development for year 2000.
Hello, I'm Ross Hampton. Spring is definitely in the air, at least in the Stockland Mall. For those who love petals of a perfect form, the Newcastle Horticultural Society's garden show is not to be missed. I'll have a full report in tonight's news.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
Newcastle's bid for the frigate contract certainly hit the news in the last 24 hours. A report to a monthly meeting of the Hunter Development Board indicated that a Navy commander, who's soon to become the Deputy Director of the frigate contract, had visited Newcastle and pointed out a number of deficiencies. These included the possible unsuitability of Carrington Slipway's sideways launching system, the need for dredging of the Hunter River between Carrington Slipways and the Steelworks Channel to a depth of 8 to 10 metres, and a claim that Carrington Slipways does not have the experience in outfitting, trialling and commissioning complex warships. The General Manager of Carrington Slipway's Fiberglass Division, Keith Lynch, hit back at the criticism today, saying the company was well aware that certain things had to be organised to accommodate a contract of the size of the frigates. He says the sideways launching system is adequate and that the company's current experience can be supplemented by expertise from within their consortium.
Well, Carrington Slipways have been building ships for 25 years and virtually launched them all sideways. We've launched bigger ships than the frigates would seem to be, and we believe there'd be no problem. These frigates are definitely a complex warship, but through our own capability, that which we'd buy in, and also the expertise of others that we would have in our consortium, we could confidently handle it.
The chairman of the Hunter Development Board, Alex Young, denies that the board has hindered the cause by releasing the commander's comments. He claims the board wanted to discuss any problems so they could be rectified before it was too late.
That all the things dealt with in that report are already being looked at by the relevant authorities, so that all that was happening was that our officer was simply indicating to the board, look, this is the position, we ought to be making sure that these things are right now.
Local tourism, or the lack of it, has been gaining a lot of attention over the past few months. Calling a public forum, the Newcastle City Tourist Association, headed by Horst Ondrelat, attempted to ease concern that Newcastle was lacking the right know-how to lure the tourist. Since the association was established last October, Mr Ondrelat stressed that a lot of work has already been done to redirect Newcastle back on the right step. He said because the city isn't a typical tourist destination, it's suffering from a bad image problem, largely promoted from within Newcastle, and what's needed is a change of attitude.
We should put our act together and do something and thinking more positive in our town. If we don't think positive in Newcastle, how can we expect that the outside is thinking positive about us?
Well, despite the criticism, do you believe that Newcastle is heading in the right direction towards tourism?
Oh, well, people were surprised, and that is another aspect which hasn't been known because nobody bothers to contact the local tourist association, that we have more than 2,000 people going through our rail carriage. We have been outside in Sydney promoting Newcastle with success. Obviously, not everyone can identify themselves as a visitor, and most probably doesn't say, well, we have been influenced by a certain advertising campaign or whatever, but the people were surprised about the success we have already.
Hello, I'm Jane Button. Tonight I'll be reporting on the official opening of a new regional office for the recreational boating services. While in Newcastle, Public Works Minister Laurie Brereton announced that recreational boating fees would be frozen for at least until the end of the financial year.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Minister for Ports Laurie Brereton was in a generous mood when he officially opened a new recreational boating service office today. The new facility will be housed in the existing Maritime Services Board premises, but Mr Brereton says it will provide waterways users with access to information and assistance previously only available in Sydney.
And more, we hear the Maritime Services Board being spoken about as an organisation that doesn't just serve the big shippers, but instead is absolutely committed to the full range of boating services, particularly recreational boating services for the millions of people who enjoy using our waterways each year.
Mr Brereton also announced that $500,000 will be spent on upgrading navigational aids for recreational boating on the central and north coasts. He says these improvements will be carried out before the peak of the summer boating season and will complement normal maintenance on navigational aids. And the other good news for recreational boating enthusiasts is that the state government has decided to freeze all boating charges until at least the end of the financial year.
Union spokesman Dick Appleby says isolated groups of employees were approached on Monday night about a 66% reduction in bonus and changes to rosters, manning, breaks and shift durations from Friday. At first, they stopped work just for the day, but a meeting this morning called on the company to negotiate openly with the unions. When no agreement on this could be reached, the men decided to extend their stoppage indefinitely. Unions have been fearing that companies will try to force changes and have been closely monitoring work sites. A mass stop work will occur on Friday when an aggregate meeting will be held at Branxton. This is expected to consider a call for a week-long national strike from the 14th of this month and a march and rally in Canberra to try and force political action over the deteriorating coal industry.
Lining up for today's final in the mixed master pairs were Jim Stevens and Marion Bresch from Windale Gateshead and Pat Barwick of Waratah and Marge Hornby from Katara. Stevens and Bresch won through to the final after defeating Australian representative Dorothy Roach from Rose Hill in Sydney and Ken Meetham from Tarrant Point. Dorothy Roach has just been selected in the Australian women's team, which will be playing a test series in Papua New Guinea next month. In the other semi-final, Barwick and Hornby beat Tony Zermack and Betty Bellis of Cahaiba 22-17. This is the 11th year the tournament has been played and it's attracted 64 bowlers from the Hunter Valley, Sydney and interstate. Organisers say the standard of play has been excellent, with this afternoon's final made even more testing in the blustery conditions.
The three men and their support team were given a civic send-off from Newcastle on the 17th of last month. Unfortunately, the bleak conditions didn't improve for some time. When they were finally welcomed into Adelaide 3 weeks later, they were ready to dismount.
Of course, the big question, will they be riding home?
No. Today they remounted their bikes to make a triumphant return to their home base, not only managing the ride on schedule and without major mishap, but also exceeding their donation target. Sergeant Ian Fairweather says the trip certainly wasn't a pleasure jaunt.
Riding wasn't too bad, just that the actual weather was the problem. We had rain the first 2 days, solid rain. We got our first sunshine in Canberra, believe it or not. And also Melbourne was a good day because we had sunshine there, but the rest we had rain, hail, even snow, just outside of Wagga. But it wasn't too bad.
The cyclists and their team were officially welcomed back by Officer Commanding the Base Support Wing, Group Captain Les Dunn. Throughout the trip, the support team had been collecting donations with the hope of raising $50,000. The final figure of $53,000 will be given back to cancer research bodies in the state in which it was collected.
But enough of bike riding for the moment? Yes, the bikes will be going in the shed.